Something big is happening in the UK right now, and almost nobody is talking about it honestly. A record number of young people are leaving the UK. Now, they're not leaving for a gap year or leaving for just the sunshine, but a lot of them are leaving because the maths of life in Britain simply isn't adding up any longer. Today we're diving into why a net of 110,000 under 35s left the UK in the last year and what that means for your finances, your future, and whether you decide to stay or remain in the UK. And stay with me because I also want to share why, and for some people, leaving the UK could become catastrophic, and what many people don't realize about working abroad. Now, I want to be clear with today's video. I'm not making this video to encourage you to leave the UK. No, okay? I specifically want to focus on what the data says and then share some of my own observations so that you can then make a decision that you hopefully will not regret, okay? Now, I want to see some reactions in the comment section. If you plan to leave the UK, comment with an aeroplane emoji, okay? And if you plan to stay in the UK, comment with a British flag or a Union Jack emoji right there in the comment section. But please keep all comments respectful, as I know this topic can feel quite divisive at times. So let's please be respectful of other people's opinions and views. Now, I'm going to break today's video into a few sections, okay? So part one, we're going to focus on what the new ONS data actually reveals. For part two, we're going to look at the 5 forces that are pushing young people out of the UK. I'm going to break them down. Part 3, I want us to then look at where are these people actually going and why are they going to these places. For part 4, I want to look at the deeper story. There's a shift in the national mood in the UK. Let's explore that a bit more. And part 5, I want to look at why older people, that's right, are returning back to the UK and why that actually matters for you and I. Part 6, we're going to then look at, before you leave the UK, here are the potential catastrophic risks you need to actually understand. This might actually even save someone's life. Part 7, we're going to look at, should you then leave the UK or should you stay? I want to share a very unusual perspective that I'm sure you would not have heard from anywhere else. And for part 8, I want us to look at how young people or middle-aged people or older people can still build wealth in the UK as well as in other similar economies. And then I want to wrap up this video today by looking at my own personal conclusion. And then I want to hear from you in the comments as well. If you're new to our work, my name's Ken of the Humble Penny and Financial Joy Academy. I am a chartered accountant, a former chief financial officer, as well as a financial coach. I run this platform with my wife, Mary, husband and wife team, and together we are Sunday Times best-selling authors. And we recently announced a new book that's just come out titled The Wealth Habit, which is all about the small changes that will make you rich. The Wealth Habit is a groundbreaking behavior-driven approach to wealth building that rewires the way you think about money, turning financial success into a series of tiny, effortless, repeatable actions. So I want to just take this moment to thank everyone who has pre-ordered The Wealth Habit already. It really means a lot to us. We know we can't be where we are today without you guys. And we've got some good news to share on top of it. We recently agreed to an Italian translation of The Wealth Habit, which is just mind-blowing, even before the books come out. And we expect more language translations the more you guys support our work here at The Humble Penny by ordering or gifting copies of The Wealth Habit. So please order your copy. I'll link to it below as well as above for you to head over and check it out for yourself. I'd also massively appreciate you taking a moment to hit that like button because it helps to encourage other people to watch our videos. And feel free to share this video with other people who are also thinking about what to do. All right, let's jump into part 1, or section 1 rather, which is what the new ONS data actually reveals. All right, let's first look at this ONS chart of total emigration from the UK, i.e. people leaving the UK to live in another country for a period of at least 12 months. That's the definition. Now you can see the green line shows that the total number of people leaving the United Kingdom is the highest it has been, looking as far back as, say, 2012. 693,000 people of different nationalities left the UK in the last 12 months. Now, up on this screen is a split by nationality, okay? Now, non-EU nationals, which is the dark blue line, accounted for 41% of total emigration. That's 286,000 people. British nationals, which is the purple line, made up 36%. That's 252,000 people. And EU nationals, it's the light blue line, made up 22% or 155,000 people. Now, for non-EU nationals leaving the UK, the top 5 were Indians, Chinese, Nigerian, Pakistani and Ukrainian. Up on the screen is a chart to kind of show you what that looks like. Now, for EU citizens who are leaving the UK, up on the screen is a summary according to the Office for National Statistics, or the ONS. And you can see there that the top 10 nationalities are this in order. And I was quite surprised by this. Number 1 was Romanian, by far the largest, then Polish, the next large number, then Italian, Bulgarian, Spanish, Portuguese, French, Irish, Lithuanian, and Greek. Now, for the first time, the ONS has broken down exactly who is leaving Britain by age, revealing how Britain's already aging society is losing young people while drawing back the elderly back to the country. Up on the screen are the net migration numbers for Brits according to the ONS as featured. I took this one from the Telegraph. Now you see, and this bit here is actually the shocker, that according to the ONS, around 3/4 of British nationals who emigrated in the year ended June 2025 were under the age of 35. Just process that for a minute. Net of 110,000 young Brits left in just 1 year. Now, this means that the UK isn't just losing people. Just think about it for a minute. It's actually losing the future. It's workers, it's innovators and entrepreneurs, and it's losing its future taxpayers, which means there'll be more tax for you and I to pay. Much of this pain comes from long-standing structural issues that exist, such as a weak job market in the UK, stagnant wages generally when you compare that to inflation, high housing costs that a lot of people are experiencing, rising employer costs under previous governments. Although, the recent budget we saw, which I'll link to below and above to see our analysis, the recent Labour budget will most certainly accelerate the number of young people leaving the UK. But the thing worth mentioning is that this isn't a one-party issue, it's a systemic one. Now, meanwhile, older Britons are returning and not leaving as much. Net migration for 35 to 44-year-olds was only 15,000 people. For 45 to 54-year-olds, it was only 2,000 people net migration. That's people leaving versus people coming back. For 55 to 64-year-olds, it was 7,000 more people actually moved back to the UK than actually left. And for over 65s, 11,000 more people moved back to the UK than actually left. Now, for 35 to 54-year-olds, they are likely already tied down. Think about it. I'm in that age range. So people have marriages, or they might be in relationships where one person says, hey, I want to move. The other person says, hey, I'm not sure. If that's you, let me know in the comments. They likely have responsibilities for raising children. Again, I'm in that club where their children are going through education and they'd have to pay if they actually moved abroad. Yeah, whereas they might get that free in the UK via the state school system. Well, not free, but they're paying for it through their taxes. They might have their mortgages, which has a massive psychological burden. Yeah, they might already have careers, which would be harder to start again in a totally different country. That same group, the older lot, might actually have extended family members. They might have aging parents, a big topic. Meanwhile, those over 55s are, as I mentioned earlier, returning back to the UK more than they are leaving when looking at the last 12 months, for example. And this might be because they have already had their fun, right? They've got out there, they've taken some risks, they've seen the world, they already be missing family and friends. They might actually need the NHS more as they get older, yeah? And they likely want access to their state pensions. That's right. All right, let's look at section 2 of this video, which is the 5 forces pushing young people out of the UK. Now, the first one I identified is stealth taxes, which are eating into take-home pay. Frozen thresholds means that millions pay more tax without ever getting richer over time. The OBR says that 5.2 million new taxpayers are affected by this. So 4.8 million get dragged into the 40% tax rate, 600,000 get dragged into the 45% tax rate. And this has been going on for years, as you know, from 2021 when they froze this threshold. And by 2030, almost 20%, that's 1 in 5 employees, will become a higher rate taxpayer. That's compared to only 8% in 2021 when those thresholds became frozen for the first time. Plus, on top of all this, student loan thresholds are becoming frozen, which means that repayments will happen a lot sooner, and which then means that graduates will start to pay back a lot earlier their student loans, and that means that their wages get even more stagnant. This effectively functions as another stealth tax. The second reason is that employers are hiring fewer younger people. From October 2024, employers' national insurance rose, and of course with that came a slowdown in hiring. Graduates and school leavers were the first hit because employers will look for where they can save money. Youth unemployment is now at 15%, the highest in a decade outside the pandemic. Data shows that over 700,000 young people are out of work. The third reason is housing costs have become ridiculous. They've become absurd, basically. You find that 40 to 60% of income is spent on stuff like rent in major UK cities for young people. Then you have to think about adding food, utilities, transport, potentially childcare, council tax, and so on. All these are very expensive. Young people feel effectively like they are stuck before they've even gotten started. Reason number 4 is the environment. So cold weather, high crime, and rising racism in the UK. These all speak to the environment, as I mentioned earlier, and a lot of people don't like the way things are heading. So the cold weather is, of course, balanced out by increasingly hotter summers in the UK. And we personally, as a family, like to break up the winters where we can with some time outside the UK, somewhere warm, whilst also making sure that we are looking for small ways to appreciate the winter and enjoy the changing seasons, because this is how life is. Life is made up of different seasons. However, the higher crime and increasingly hostile environment in the UK is one of great concern. And it's clear why this is forcing people to basically consider their options to move to other countries where they might feel more accepted, which really is a shame. That said, the grass is not always greener. Literally just last night, take the weather. I went to pick my son up from the O2 Arena, and I was speaking to another parent who's this Asian guy whose sister or brother, I seem to recall, moved to Australia. And she said that parts of what she learned was part of Australia has a thin ozone layer, meaning that they have little protection from the sun and a higher risk of skin cancers. So you can see it's not always better out there. Number 5 is global mobility has shifted. Young people are leaving simply because they can. That's right. So things like remote working, fast Wi-Fi, easy video calls, cheap flights to Europe, English spoken as a global business language. Literally, it feels like the world has shrunk. And that creates options for young people, right? A young Brit today can build a life in, say, Lisbon, maybe working for a London startup, earning their money in pounds, operating entirely in English, and they could easily fly back to the UK in 2 to 3 hours. That's happening right now. That's something that simply wasn't possible a generation ago. Young people are just being pushed out. This is a reality. They are being pulled towards new opportunities all over the world. Let's look at section 3 of this video today, which is where are they all going and why? Popular question, this one. Now, there are many countries, but Australia definitely stands out as a popular one, especially for white Brits, okay? So working holiday visas for Brits rose 80% in a single year. Youth unemployment is under 10% in Australia. And wages are often higher, according to the research. But beyond Australia, there are various other places that people are going. For example, Portugal has things like the digital nomad visas. It's not far from the UK either. Spain and Germany offer remote work routes. Take, for example, my brother recently moved to Malaga in Spain and is absolutely loving it out there. Mary and I went recently to visit and couldn't believe how good he's having it in Malaga. So he pays about 1,500 euros a month, which is about 1,300 pounds. And what he gets per month is just unbelievable. Let me just break it down to you. He gets the warm weather all year round, 8 minutes walk to a beach, a high-end 2-bedroom flat with 2 bathrooms, really high-end. I'm talking like really high-end, including a swimming pool, a gym, a jacuzzi, a co-working space, and the pace of life is slower and people are actually really friendly. Like the vibes are absolutely amazing. So we went there, really loved it. Now the UAE is also an extremely popular destination and offers tax-free salaries. I'll share more about the UAE in a minute, 'cause I have some real life examples to share with you guys. Here up on the screen is a table that we found with the top 10 most popular destination for Brits who are leaving the UK. Now, looking at that list, you see you've got Spain, the United States, Australia, France, which I was pretty surprised by, Italy, Germany, United Arab Emirates, New Zealand, I met someone literally yesterday who's going there, Ireland, and Canada, okay? Now, all that said, my lived experience as a black person living in the UK is that black people are mostly going to a mixture of destinations, and they are, number one, the UAE, mainly cities like Dubai and Sharjah. I hope I'm saying that properly, Sharjah. Now, I've heard mixed stories about the UAE, and I'm going to just share, again, it's just lived experience. Now, there are those who love it, yeah? For example, 2 days ago, Mary and I went to an event and we met Jamelia, the award-winning singer, actress, and television personality. She's really lovely. Really got chatting to her, and we're speaking to her about Dubai. She moved to Dubai in 2024. And we asked her about her experiences and she loves it there. She moved there because she wanted a different environment for herself. So again, a purpose-led move, right? Now, one tip she gave was that she worked for a whole year, saved up, a lot of money, and then made her move. Yeah, and that was a really useful tip. We've also previously interviewed other people, Bricks with Tips, who live in Dubai, and Dr. Amina Yunus, who lives in Sharjah, which is a cheaper part of the UAE. And they had very good things to say about the UAE. They kept it real. It's obviously not perfect, but for them, it works. I'll link below and above to those interviews for you guys to go and check out when you have a moment. Now, note that everyone I've spoken about so far is a public figure, okay? So you might be wondering, well, Ken, what about everyday people? What do you know about those guys? Now, I've got lots of examples, but I'll use one. I spoke to a friend of mine who is an accountant. We trained together as chartered accountants back in 2008, right? And she moved to Dubai with all the perks. This is before Dubai became very popular, right? She lived there and worked there for years, yeah? She then got married and they had 3 children. However, like recently, I started chatting to her and she's moved back to the UK. And I asked her, like, why have you moved back? Everyone's heading to Dubai. Why have you moved back to the UK? And she had 2 main reasons. The first, it got too expensive to pay for private schools for all 3 children. So she moved back to the UK for the UK state school system. The second reason was that she moved back for the NHS because paying for a family of 5 out there just got too expensive from a healthcare perspective. Plus, all those perks that she had before she moved out there had basically dried up because there are now people that are moving there. Lots of people are moving there. And, the UAE, they don't really need to, Dubai, they don't need to offer those perks to people really because there's so much demand for that location. Basically, in summary, it became too expensive to live in Dubai. From other people, I've also heard that Dubai is very expensive. And that people, yes, they do have a good lifestyle over there. Absolutely, no question. But that comes at a cost, okay? I've heard people say they never save any money at all in Dubai. Although I spoke to a single lady yesterday at Financial Joy Academy meetup, and she said she saved loads because she's a single person. But what do you guys think about this? What's your personal experience? Jump in the comments and let me know. What's your reaction to what I just shared about Dubai? Is it true? Is it your lived experience, or have you heard from other people? Jump in the comments and let me know. Now, coming back to the list of places I've seen black people move to, and this applies to people of other ethnicities, by the way, whether you're Asian or white. Here are the locations I've seen. Number one, like I mentioned, is the UAE, okay? Number two is Qatar, and not in any order, by the way. Number three is Canada. A lot of my doctor friends have moved there. They just packed up, took their kids and got Canada. Number four is Portugal. Number five is Bermuda. I've seen a few doctors. I'll link below and above to a video we made about this one. Number six is African countries like Ghana, quite popular. A few of our friends have actually moved there. Rwanda, very popular. Kenya, woo! We visited Kenya, absolutely loved it. We went to Nairobi, went to Diani near, Mombasa, loved it. Other countries include Nigeria. Not perfect, but people are moving there. Moving back, South Africa, Gambia, Tanzania, like Zanzibar and so on. And in the Caribbean, lots of places. Barbados, Grenada. In fact, the day we met Jamelia, we met a young lady who's 37, who's moving to Grenada as we speak. Jamaica, St. Lucia. Then there are the Asian countries like Singapore. Woo! We went there mostly 2 or 3 years ago. Two of our friends have moved. Went to uni with them. They've left the UK, got Singapore. Then there's Malaysia, then there's Thailand. So jump in the comments and let us know what countries you've seen friends or family move to if they left the UK. I kind of want to see a list in the comments section. Now let's look at section 4. I want to look at a deeper story about the UK. There's a shifting national mood. And let me know if this resonates with you, because in the UK, the sense I get, and the sense a lot of people around me are getting, is that there's a growing sense of drift that's happening. A feeling that the UK has basically lost its spark. It's lost the spark. There's a cloud of negativity in the UK that's amplified like 10,000% by social media. And young people are losing the belief that the country offers opportunity. Yeah. This is not just economic, by the way. This is emotional. Yeah. It's psychological. It's also cultural. Yeah. Here in the UK. So when you think about it, when a generation stops believing in its own country, migration simply accelerates and keeps accelerating. Now let's look at section 5, which is why older people are returning to the UK and why that matters. Now we touched on this earlier, but worth just briefly touching on it a little bit. So over 35s, as you saw in that data earlier, less likely to leave the UK. They are more likely, in fact, to return back to UK. And that's because more people are more rooted, they are more attached to their communities that are already established. They're attached to family members. They're attached to stability. They are thinking about their children, their education. They're thinking about careers. They're thinking about belonging. They're thinking about the NHS and pensions and so on. And of course, things that we might not even think about, things like modern communication also makes returning easier. And this generational contrast basically shows us two important almost themes that I've personally noticed, which is that freedom is what drives you out, but stability is what pulls you back home. So your 20s are all about your exploration. Your 30s, or maybe late 30s and 40s and beyond are typically about you becoming more rooted somewhere. So this helps to explain the earlier migration curve that we saw earlier in that chart. Let's look at section 6, which is, before you leave, here are the catastrophic risks you must understand. Now, here's the thing. I want to keep it real, right? Here's the part nobody talks about, okay? Leaving the UK can be a smart move, and it is for a lot of people, but not for everybody. Yeah. For many people, though, it can be a catastrophe. And here are the reasons. I'll give you some practical, real-life examples. Number one is that working abroad without the right visa can destroy your future. Now, immigration lawyers are warning that this is absolutely exploding in different parts of the world. And you could face things like fines for doing that. You could face deportation from wherever you move to. You can face tax penalties. You could even face things like a future visa ban, which would not be good for you. Basically, remote work is not equal to a permission to work. Number two is lower living costs abroad often comes with lower salaries. Yeah, that's right. So cheaper rent means nothing if you have things like your income drops, because you got cheaper rent, you move somewhere, your income's dropped. Career progression slows down because you've made that move. You lack the professional recognition, because this happens in places that people move to. People often underestimate that in many industries, say healthcare, law, finance, engineering, teaching, and so on, they underestimate that your UK qualifications don't automatically transfer abroad. Yeah, so that means you might not be allowed to work in the job you trained in, for example, or you might have to start again, sit some new exams at a cost or accept a lower role while you're out there. This can, set your career and your finances back potentially for years. And the third one is you lose the financial safety nets you understand in the UK. Now, here in the UK, there are many things we overlook or take for granted, for example. Number one, a generous tax-free ISA of 20k per person per year. So that's 40k for couples. Very few countries can beat the UK ISA system. Just think about that for a moment. Next is the NHS. That speaks for itself. It could be better, but it's highly valuable. Next is the strong worker protections we have in the UK. Next is predictable pensions. Although the goalpost keeps moving, with aging and so on, but it's still better than a lot of countries. Next is our tax rules in the UK that you can actually follow, although we know it's not always very easy. Next is this state school system here in the UK. Now, some countries have none of this, or they have them but in poorer quality, or you may even need to pay for them in those countries that you're moving to, which might then wipe out all the savings or tax benefits you think you're moving for in the first place. You might not feel the pain of these points I've mentioned in a year, but over a period of a decade, for example, you'll feel them. Number 4 is emotional wealth matters. Things like family, friendships, belonging, support systems, for example. These are the invisible aspects of wealth. You don't realize how valuable they are until they're actually gone. Number 5 is you can end up in jail. Popular countries, I shouldn't laugh at this, but it's actually for real. Popular countries in the Middle East offer sunshine, high salaries, tax-free lifestyle, and that pulls in thousands of young Brits every year. But there are stories of people getting into a lot of trouble. What people don't realize is that, the laws out there in, say, take for example the Middle East, for example, are very, very different from the laws in the UK. They are strictly enforced, and breaking them, even unintentionally, and this happens, can lead to arrest, detention, or even deportation from these countries. Let's take for example, in countries, some of these countries I mentioned, things like public behavior rules, are much stricter. Things like alcohol laws vary over in these places. Cohabitation rules can apply. Social media posts, for example, can be criminalized. Although you could argue we're seeing some of that happen in the UK as well. Late payments or unpaid debts can be treated as criminal offenses rather than kind of civil offenses. And working without the correct visa is taken extremely seriously. Extremely seriously. In the UK, for example, missing a payment might lead to you getting a letter or a penalty. But over there in the Middle East, for example, it can and does lead to criminal charges in some cases. Okay, this means that young Brits who move out there without fully understanding the legal system can find themselves in very serious trouble very quickly because they didn't take the time to kind of understand how things work. Migration advisors have said things like the biggest problem they're noticing is people assuming that UK norms apply abroad. So they take the same thinking, the same mindset, and go and try and copy and paste it over there. In some Middle Eastern countries, they don't do that, and the consequences can be severe, of course. So the simple message to anyone considering kind of moving out there is that you must understand the legal system of the country you are moving to. Especially if it's not aligned with Western norms, or even like, the religions are different and stuff like that. Because a move meant to improve your finances and save you money and give you a lifestyle can end up actually threatening your freedom if you don't know the rules. All right, let's look at section 7, which is the big question. So, should you leave the UK? And I want to offer you an unusual take. Because the real question is, are you leaving to escape, or are you leaving to pursue something? And here's my unusual take, because I told you I'd give you a different perspective. Whenever I see people talking about this idea, should I leave the UK, and with me discussing with my friends as well, whether it's people are trying to leave because of the economy, or the cost of living, or they just feel stuck, I'm reminded of two powerful stories from the Bible. As a person of faith, I always like to look back at the past to kind of see and pray about stuff to kind of move forward. And these stories can teach us something about what we should do when it comes to migration. Let's look at the first story, which is the story of Isaac, who had the call to stay. You see, in Genesis chapter 26, there was a severe famine in the land. Yeah. So a famine like that could be the modern equivalent of economic pressures, cost of living crisis, lack of opportunities, and so on. Right. That could be the modern take on that. And what happened back then was that people were moving. Right. Opportunities were drying up, and everyone's like we are today. People are trying to move and find better places to go to. And Isaac was preparing to leave Egypt, the place everyone believed had the better prospects. He's preparing to leave for Egypt, yeah? But then something unusual happened. So he's thinking, I should move to Egypt and go where everybody's going. In Genesis chapter 26, verse 2-3, it says, "The Lord appeared to Isaac and said, 'Do not go down to Egypt. Live in the land where I tell you to live.'" Okay. And in the third verse, it says, "Stay in this land for a while, and I will be with you, and I will bless you. For to you and your descendants I will give all these lands, and will confirm the oath I swore to your father Abraham." Now, in this part of the story, we're told that Isaac actually listens. He actually stays put in the country where he is. And in the same year, while everyone else was fleeing and going abroad, he prospered 100-fold. Genesis chapter 26, verse 12-13 says that Isaac planted crops in that land, and the same year reaped 100-fold because the Lord blessed him. It says in verse 13 that the man became rich and his wealth continued to grow until he became very wealthy. Now, I don't know about you, when I was reading that, I was thinking to myself, planting crops, quote unquote, means that he basically invested where he was. Yeah. And you see, sometimes the right move is not actually to move at all. Not because, the situation isn't hard, but because your purpose for that season is in the place you attempted to actually run away from. Okay, so that's story number one. And story number two is the story of Jacob. Again, from the Bible, Jacob had the call to actually leave and go somewhere else. So fast forward to Genesis 46. Jacob is older, yeah? And a door opens for him to relocate to Egypt, a completely different culture, a new economic system, a fresh start for his family, and so on. But Jacob isn't sure. And here's the key bit, and this can relate to a lot of us right now with our lives, and I feel like I can relate to this. Here's what he does. He pauses in Beersheba, another place, to seek God before taking such a big leap. That's the key. He pauses to seek God. And God said to him in a vision at night, God said, "Do not be afraid to go down to Egypt, for I will go with you." Yeah. And in chapter 46, verse 3, it went on to say, God said, "I'm God, the God of your father," he said, "Do not be afraid to go down to Egypt, for I will make you," and it's key bit, "I will make you into a great nation there. I will go down to Egypt with you, and I will surely bring you back again." And that move that he makes becomes a turning point for an entire nation. Just as our parents moved, and that became a turning point for a lot of our lives, a lot of our families. Sometimes for a lot of people, the right move is actually to go, not out of fear, but because the next chapter of your life is tied to a new environment. So the lesson from both stories is exactly this. There isn't a holy answer of always staying or of always leaving. Yeah. Isaac was blessed by staying. He stayed put and he was blessed. Jacob was blessed by leaving. Yeah. But here's the wisdom. The wisdom is in knowing which season you are actually in your life. And here's the part that most people actually miss in this whole debate, which is there's a difference between a push-based migration and a purpose-based migration. These are two different things. So if you are actually moving just because life is hard, and so on, that's a push-based migration. But if you are moving because you've reflected, you've sought counsel, you've prayed about it, and genuinely feel led to do it, then that's a purpose. Yeah. And purpose always leads to provision. Yeah. So as you think about whether to, leave the UK or wherever you are in the world, or whether to stay, just remember that, some people are meant to stay and build up the country, build up the communities, and so on. And other people are meant to go and grow. The key is not the country, the key is having clarity. Okay, let's look at section 8, which is how young people can still build wealth in the UK and in other similar economies. Here's how to build wealth even in a tough UK economy. So the very first thing I'd say is build the 4 pillars, okay, for building wealth. And the pillars, this is something we teach. The pillars are build a mindset, build the habits, build the system, and then build the life. 4 key pillars. These are the 4 parts of our new book, The Wealth Habit. And we show you exactly how to build these 4 pillars. Now, this approach to building wealth is applicable no matter where you are in the world, whether in the UK, in Europe, America, Asia, Africa, Caribbean, and it will help you make wealth building effortless, inevitable, and sustainable for life. Okay, so I'll link below as well as above for you to head over and order your copy of our brand new book, The Wealth Habit. And while you're there, if you can, if your budget allows it, why not gift a copy to a loved one? Yeah, we've created that book with the future of money management in mind. Number 2 is to design your tax strategy intentionally. So here I'm talking about use your ISAs, your tax-free ISAs, your pensions, your salary sacrifice, whilst you still can, employer matching, and creating a side business structure. Number 3 is to build global skills. Yeah, look at the way the world's moving. Skills are mobile, but jobs are not. Number 4 is start investing. Of course, as early as you can, even small amounts. Compounding is the great equalizer, and you have to take advantage of it. Then number 5 is focus on ownership and not just your income. Income pays your bills, you and I know that. But ownership is what buys your freedom. The more global that ownership is, in my opinion, the better. Okay, let's look at the conclusion now. So I've had a lot to say on this video and I'd love to hear from you guys in comments, but my views is that the UK is changing. We are entering a decade of high taxes, low growth, low productivity, and higher cost of living. And of course, as more people leave, the tax burden falls on you and I, for example. Young people are responding and they are making moves. Question is what are you gonna do? In case you're wondering what we are doing in our lives, we still live in the UK and our dream has always been, I've said this before, has always been to have a hybrid life where we are spending time in the UK, but also spending time, maybe the colder months, in somewhere else, maybe in the African continent. This is something that a lot of Brits have been doing for decades. They live in the UK, but they spend time in Spain. Like I've got a gardener, he's got a house in Spain, he goes to Spain all the time. I spend time in Spain, Portugal, and so on. So question is whether you stay or go, you can still design a life of freedom if you approach it strategically rather than just emotionally. And I was reflecting more deeply on this point, which is that truth is you only have one life, guys. One life, people, and that one life is short. So live your one life how you actually want to live it while you still can. Just think about that. I'm at a stage of life where I'm in my early 40s, which is at the sort of age where my parents actually moved across continents for us so that we can have a better life. So I'm thinking about all of that at the moment in my life. They did what they needed to do. And without that move they made, I wouldn't be where I am today. There would be no the humble penny, there would be no financial freedom, there would be no nothing, there would be no family. And for that, I'm eternally grateful. You might also be at a stage of life where you feel like you are at a crossroads and you are trying to make a decision. But I hope I've given you enough in today's video to help you consider and make that decision, whatever that decision might be for you personally. Let me know in the comments section, are you thinking of leaving the UK or are you going to stay in the UK or something else? Jump in the comment section and let me know. If you found this video useful, please do us a favor, hit that like button and subscribe. Come on, look at all the effort that goes into these videos. Please subscribe. Every single one matters so much to us. Share this video with one other person, by the way, who would love to be guided. Yeah? And don't go anywhere. Watch this next video titled 10 Hidden Games a System Uses to Keep You Poor. I think you're going to love watching this next one. Thank you guys so much for watching today's video. And on behalf of Mary and I, as always, in all things, be thankful and seek joy. Take care, much love, and bye for now.